Today we have to talk about the question of questions: can alcohol-free wine really be called wine? Wine, per definition, is nothing else than fermented grape juice. So the yeast start to eat the sugar and they produce alcohol in the end. And grape juice is just the same product without the fermentation. And grape juice is also what most of the dealcoholized wines are called by people who say, well, this product has lost so much of intensity, complexity, and aromas that it's nothing else than a grape juice, but grape juice is just cheaper. And then there are people like Tiffany Ng from Étiquette winery in Denmark who do not try to just create a workaround for the process, but who try to solve the problem itself. They invented a process where an actual fermentation of grape juice happens, but in the end, no alcohol is produced. So you end up having the same complexity, structure, and aromatic profile of wine without alcohol. And this was so interesting that I asked Tiffany if she wanted to come to the podcast. We recorded an episode on that. We were talking about the critiques, even in gastronomy, who are starting to accept products like this because they are actually seeing the benefits of stuff like that. So come with me and join us in this amazing chat about the future of gastronomy when it comes to alcohol-free wine. Let's go.
Welcome to the Pinot Pixel podcast episode number 305. And today I'm here with Tiffany Ng from Étiquette winery in Denmark. Tiffany, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Your product seems revolutionary. Wine without alcohol, made without fermentation. What was the exact moment of, let's say, personal frustration that made you say the market needs a real non-alcoholic wine and I'm going to invent it myself?
That's a good question. I think it was, if we think specific moment, sometime in September 2020. So in Copenhagen, which is where I'm based, Copenhagen had just opened up, society for a few months' time, and everyone was out enjoying themselves. And so I was out with a few friends, and we were, on the harbor, Copenhagen Harbor, enjoying some alcoholic wine. And we were just having a glass, and we offered our friend who was driving the boat a glass as well. And he couldn't partake because, of course, he was driving the boat like you drive a car. And afterwards, he said, I really felt, despite you guys being good friends of mine, I felt like I was left out because I was drinking water all day and you guys were um, drinking wine. And it wasn't that it was a rowdy party. We were just enjoying each other's company, but something for him in terms of how the conversation went, how the interpersonal relationship was just so different. And so that really kind of was the moment where we said, are there even alcohol-free wines out there? And of course, it's a very different situation today. But 4.5 years ago almost, we lined up as many alcohol-free wines as we could find. And we said, well, what is actually out there? Let's do a little market research. And this is all of us wearing our business hats on. So I come from the law and business side of things rather than food, but have fallen into food and hospitality the past 15 years. And so we've lined everything up and we said, are any of them good? Because if they are great, we'll go buy some and, enjoy that as well. We've also been competitive athletes for much of our lives. So we enjoy good flavored drinks, whether they're alcoholic or non-alcoholic. And to be honest, they were all pretty bad. And you can imagine the industry 4.5 years ago. It's not nearly as developed as it is today. And so I think we had about 15 different products. We had brought some back from North America, which is where I'm from originally. Flew things in from Sweden, from the UK, from Germany. And they were all not just unsatisfactory, but I think what was the most perhaps surprising thing as somebody who drinks alcoholic wine is they all tasted the same. So, alcoholic wine, if it's from Napa Valley or Tuscany or Bordeaux, they all have their own characteristics. Whether you like it or not, that's subjective, but at least you can tell a difference. And with the non-alcoholic wines, we couldn't tell a difference. And they all also had a very industrial expression, is how I like to say it. And so we said, well, what about the technology? It must be the technology that makes it taste like this. So we learned about dealcoholization. And long story short, that's where we realized it's very unsustainable as a practice. It strips a vast majority of the volatiles, way up to 95%, according to some studies. It is expensive, and people aren't particularly happy with it. So that's when we said, well, if ethanol is the bottleneck and you spend, let's say, a year creating alcoholic wine to then take the ethanol out again, isn't the logical question, how do you ferment without creating ethanol? So that's when we said, we think that there's something here, a market opportunity, but also from a sustainability standpoint, a huge opportunity for the world. So we said, well, how hard could it be? Let's give it a go. It was a lot
Okay.
harder than we thought, let's be honest, but that's how we dove into it.
Okay. So as you said, the current, let's say, standard of non-alcoholic wine or behind non-alcoholic wine is dealcoholization. And when we talk to experts, they usually say you lose 40 to 60% of the character, of the structure, of the complexity of a wine, even if you choose a high quality one in the beginning. And you chose, as you said, the way of bypassing the whole fermentation with alcohol process entirely. What would you say is the, let's say, biggest sacrifice you had to make on that way and during that process?
I don't know if it's a sacrifice, but more so a complete reframing in terms of how you think about winemaking. And let me know if I'm not answering the question, but especially in the early days when we were talking to winemakers, and given my experience in the industry, I've developed quite a deep network of alcoholic wine producers. They all said, but if there's no ethanol, how can it be wine? And I think for us, it is simply reframing how you think about wine, right? Because what we believe is that the biological solution is the future for this industry rather than an industrial one, which is dealcoholization. And if we think biological, this is, and we'll dive into the process in a little bit, but we believe this is the closest that you can actually get to the art of winemaking, the traditional means of winemaking. What you have in your cellars in terms of equipment, that's what you use. You know, we don't have fancy machinery. You're not using foreign material. It is your grapes coming from the fields that you're pressing, that you're using for our fermentation process. So I don't feel that we've actually had to compromise on anything. But if there's something that you're getting at more specifically, let me know.
My first thought when I heard about your process was that is the most brilliant thing to have a non alcoholic wine at the moment, because wine by definition is something that results out of a fermentation of grapes. And we always have in mind these specific yeast strings that just produce the alcohol in the finish, in the end. And we will talk about your process in a second, but basically it is, you could call it wine, maybe not by law, but the idea still is the same, just that the yeast is doing something different. So it's fine,
You
it's cool.
Yeah, you no, you're very right about that. And one thing that I always like to clarify, especially for consumers rather than winemakers, is when we think fermentation within the wine world, they have led us to believe that fermentation must equal alcohol. Now, there are millions, tens of millions of microbial strains in the world. For alcoholic winemaking, we have just chosen a handful of them. There are many more out there that can do many different things aside from create ethanol. And so for us, it is fermentation. It's just what ingredients you use.
So let's, when we talk about the product, the etiquette, I don't know if it's wine or the etiquette product, let's call it like this. Um, would you say that you are also focused on storytelling, where the grapes are coming from, and the idea of terroir that is very, very deeply installed in the brain of a wine drinker?
That's a good question. And for us, I think that's a slightly more nuanced approach, just because being based in Copenhagen, we don't have vineyards all around us, and getting access to a large variety and fresh grape must, of course, is not the easiest. But you're right that when we are implementing our process into different varietals of grapes, the intention is that the characteristics of those grapes shine through. Because if you're masking it, then of course that's not ideal. Also thinking for wine producers who have whatever grapes it is that they work with, we want to make sure that they can still identify that it is their product. So similarly for us, we I wouldn't call it terroir just because we're not growing our own grapes, but we are having different expressions, and those expressions are taking inspiration from different styles of wine. And for us, it's almost like a playground when we put out our etiquette own branded products. It's to understand how far can we push the technology, and does the consumer actually like what we're doing? What is their feedback? Because at the end of the day, as we know, taste is subjective. Even amongst the top wine tasters, wine experts in the world, they disagree on a lot of things, flavor being one of them. And for us, we may think one thing in, let's say, the lab or in our production, but at the end of the day, if you as a consumer don't like it, well, then there needs to be adjustments.
Mhm. So can you take us on a little journey on where you're currently sourcing your products or your grapes from, and how this, I mean, it's still a terroir. Maybe it's not all elements we have in mind when it comes to terroir are involved in the process, but I think you have made some testing and some tastings as well.
Yes, absolutely. So we have currently 4 products on the market, and actually, as of yesterday, we are getting ready to relaunch the 5th one, which is our sparkling. It's been a long time coming in relaunching that one. But for depending on which of the products we source from Italy or Spain at the moment. And we are starting to explore Portuguese and German varietals as well. But a part of what we choose, and this is again for Etiquette's own branded products, one is a ready availability throughout the year. So we work with suppliers that keep large stocks so that we can order throughout the year, kind of just in time production. Another is different grape profiles. So, for example, for our vermouth, which needs to be much bigger bodied and provide the tannic structure, we have Alicante Boucher from Spain. So we wouldn't choose a super light, fruity, juicy red for that product because we had a very clear idea of what the end profile would be. Or similarly, for our crisp and tropical, we use Iren, which is quite a fresh, floral, aromatic grape. So it provides the base for us to then be able to tease it in the different directions that we need.
It's a very diverse portfolio, actually. Super interesting. And maybe one more question to your portfolio, because you said you started with 4 products and the 5th is the first sparkling product. Usually it's the other way around. Why did you choose starting with the still products?
Yeah, good question. It was actually quite a maybe I wouldn't call it a strategic decision, but it was a conscious decision of ours because especially when we were getting ready to put our products out on the market, we could see that everybody would launch sparkling first. And it's because CO2 is a great carrier of aromas and mouthfeel, and you can hide a lot behind CO2.
Hmm.
So, you know, a carbonated product on the market, if you remove the CO2, might be completely undrinkable. And we wanted to challenge ourselves. We said, if you can create a still that consumers would enjoy, then the sparkling would be a piece of cake. And we still believe that to be true. So we started off with 2 whites. This was beginning of 2023. And the reason why we did 2 whites side by side was to show people that it could be quite different with our technology because it's not dealcoholization, which has been around for a long time. We are also not proxies, which, if you use different teas or kombuchas and juice mixes and botanicals. This is kind of cutting through the middle of those two, and to demonstrate what is possible, we needed to put 2 on the market at the same time. So we did that, and then we launched the rosé afterwards. The intention was not to actually launch the vermouth at all. Was a very pleasant accident out of R&D, and we thought, okay, well, this is so nice that we're drinking it ourselves for personal use. So if we like it so much, let's see what industry thinks. And so I just called up a bunch of on-trade colleagues in Copenhagen, and they confirmed, well, this is definitely something that you should be moving forward with. And we said, oh, okay, well, I think it was maybe 2 months after we hit on the first prototype, we said, "All right, we're launching it."
Okay. Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest, let's say, inventions in the wine industry were discovered by accident. I don't know, barrel aging and stuff like that, or even the traditional method. So maybe this is the future. I know that you're currently in the process of getting the pattern on the process. And what can you take us on a journey through the process without sharing too much of what you can share,
I
actually?
will do my best. Yeah. So I think the first thing to do is lay out what alcoholic winemaking is like, just at a high level. And what happens is you harvest your grapes, whatever type that is. You bring it into the cellar, you press it, and you get the juice. That is separated from the rest of the grape, which is the pomace. And you then stick it into tanks, and you might let it settle before you then start fermentation. Once you're done with your alcoholic fermentation, you would then, most, I would say, commercial wineries, you would rack it, you would fine it to kind of get rid of as many of the solid particles as you can. And then you would filter, make some adjustments, and then you would bottle it or age it. So for us, what we wanted to do from the beginning, and we set out some guardrails for ourselves, was that whatever process we designed, and this was in September 2020 when we were discussing this, it had to be sustainable. So much more sustainable than the existing offerings. It needed to be scalable. I've worked in fine dining in one capacity or another for a long time as well. And sometimes things are fantastic, but if you cannot scale it beyond 1,000 bottles, that's also not making the impact that we would want to make. And two, of course, it needs to be profitable. So, with that in mind, we said machinery is out of the question because capex is already a very big burden on winemakers. So, imagine if we would tell them you need to buy another giant machine, then how are we any different than dealcoholization? So, the process we settled on is biological. So, we take the grape must the same way that it comes in for alcoholic winemaking. You settle it, you prepare it, and then it is the um, unique selection of microbial strains that we have chosen, the order in which they are inoculated, the quantity that they're dosed with, temperature, oxygen. So, a lot of these for a winemaker, if you're listening, these are all very familiar. These are parameters that you would normally measure for anyway: pH, sugar, different organic acids. Um, but for us, it is at each step of the way, how do you control for those variables in a different manner? So it's a different process, not unfamiliar in terms of ingredients, but the way that you handle those variables is different. And in doing so, you're able to create other things than ethanol. So you get organic acid creation, you get biomass, CO2. So depending on what it is that we're aiming for, you would get different byproducts. And our fermentation process is less than 2 weeks. which from a sustainability, scalability standpoint is very interesting because you stick this all in whatever tank you have, of course, within reason. If you have a very unusually shaped or sized tank, that requires a lot more tweaks to our process. Um, but it is under 2 weeks, and as you're tracking these variables, twice a day, maybe once a day, you will understand what adjustments need to be made to help guide that fermentation to its finish stage. And then once it's ready, we stop the fermentation and we fine it, we rack it, we fine it, we filter. In our case, we do add a small amount of natural aromas to our products. But when we work with wine producers, they don't have to. That's a choice of theirs afterwards.
So let's say I'm an experienced winemaker, especially let's say I work more respectful of nature. Sometimes even it's this low intervention path. When we start working together, the process might be very familiar.
I would say so. Yes. An example, we just came off of a somewhat unexpected pilot project in Portugal recently in September. And the head winemaker was very skeptical. He was not a fan of us being there in his cellar. And it's because I've known the owner of the vineyard for many, many years, and she believes that this is a path forward for her vineyard because, as we know, alcoholic wine consumption is going down, sales are going down, and she said, "I need to know what to do with my grapes." So we ran a pilot, and when we sat down with him, started talking to him about the process, he went, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." He asked some clarifying questions about values or, this is vocabulary that he knew. And even though there was a language barrier, he immediately went, "Okay, I got it." So if I wanted to have an end product that is more like this, then it's more about the adjustment of those variables within the process parameters that we have. And we said, yes. And he said, okay, then we can commercialize next year. So by the end of it, he was actually a convert because he recognized how much more natural this was. They're biodynamic vineyards, so they are against intervention and therefore against dealcoholization. But he believed this would be possible technically, but also philosophically.
Hmm. And the process you just described sounds like you don't need this safety net of alcohol because the fermentation creates maybe in a different way, but also the structure and the complexity you would expect, but just with other products in the end. In the end.
Yeah, I would say that. And again, my opinion is one of many. And some people love our products, others not so much. But what we have heard across the board is that there's a lot more complexity. There's a lot more going on in the nose and the mouth than a de-alcoholized non-alcoholic wine, for example. And this is something that you don't feel like you can take 3, 4, 5 big gulps of and it tastes like juice. There's a resistance to the liquid so that you sip on it, you wait, very gastronomic as well, in many cases. So you're right that it doesn't have to be ethanol, because I think for a lot of people, when you drink alcoholic wine, it might not actually be the nuance of the wine that helps you recognize that it's a wine. It's the fact that you get the ethanol hit. You go, oh, okay. And I get some, maybe some acidity, some big fruit bomb flavor. That must be wine. And if you remove the ethanol, you can still get a lot of the other nuances.
This is the perfect segue to my favorite question I'm always asking. How would you describe your product without using the words alcohol free or alcohol and alternative?
Oh, that is a good question. I think fundamentally, it's a very tasty fermented grape based beverage, suitable for, in our case, what I like to enjoy as is a social facilitator. Whenever I think about myself around a dining table or a group of friends and we're having beverages, it doesn't matter if it's alcoholic or non alcoholic. We wanted good flavors, good experiences, also something that you can talk about and remember and maybe want to then bring on to show somebody else. And for us, it is about inclusivity rather than exclusivity. And our products are served in many Michelin star restaurants, but they're also very suitable for just sipping in the backyard, among family or friends.
Hmm. And I mean, especially in Germany or in Central Europe, brands and also categories are built in on trade and restaurants, and fine dining is usually the place where higher quality products, especially wine, truly shine. How would you describe the current relationship to the category itself, like alcohol-free products or non-alcoholic products, and your product in the future? Because I think you had some interactions with sommeliers, especially in Copenhagen.
Yes, you're right. And when we think about how some of these sommeliers, winemakers as well, describe our product, it's not that, oh, it's non-alcoholic, whatever, non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic beverage, non-alcoholic juice. For them, it's wine. It's made the way that wine is made, just with slightly different inputs. So in some places, they put us right in the middle of their alcoholic wine list. And if you choose it based upon the description, if it's recommended by the sommelier, it happens to be non-alcoholic. It shouldn't be the defining factor. It's just an asterisk for us. So it's not just in Copenhagen, but we're seeing this also play out in other European markets. And I think that's important to note because, as we know, the Scandinavian palate might be very different than the German or the Polish or the Belgian or the English American. And what we are seeing is that this approach is starting to be shown and appreciated in many European markets. So this is not a one off, but rather, I think this is an industry shift fundamentally.
And for me, the Scandinavian countries are the driver of this huge innovation process when it comes to real high quality non alcoholic products that have never had any alcohol. Like the proxy category was, I feel it was grown. It was started. The idea was started in the Scandinavian area.
That is true. We do see increasingly more and more proxies coming out of Scandinavia, and I think a part of that is linked to the fine dining movement and evolution in the past 15 or so years. And of course, Noma has been a very key one in that when you think about fermentation and different techniques, drawing on nature. And for us, though it might not sound as romantic, I think being in Copenhagen is also great for us as a company from the biotech standpoint because we have so many great scientific minds that we're working with where um, it's not I don't think we might have progressed as quickly, perhaps in, say, southern Italy, just because the environment is different. So I do think you're right. The environment is important to a company or a brand's development and the direction that they are pushing toward.
Is that the reason why your company is based in Copenhagen?
Well, not why we started, uh, but perhaps a reason why we will continue having at least one foot here. And I think ongoing R&D, this is, if you think about the big biotech companies, if it's, no, Christian Hansen, Nova Zymes now has combined to be Novonesis. There's Nova Nordisk. These are companies that are in our backyard and that we can reach out to if it's for expertise. We have advisors that have come from high, level corporate positions in these companies. And R&D, I think, will stay here going forward just because it's become, in many ways, a hub, similar to how Silicon Valley, bred the tech boom. I think there's an opportunity here for the alcohol-free aspect.
And I met many people that are basically founders in the non-alcoholic space in Scandinavia, and I have the feeling that they are very closely connected to nature and a very respectful approach to the environment. So you can feel that in the products. This is basically the base for the idea of a more innovative approach when it comes to alcohol-free wine and other products.
Definitely. I agree 100%.
So we talked about, let's say, a new standard maybe when it comes to products that have never had any alcohol and the main driver in fine dining. Where do you see this category with these products that have never had any alcohol in the future, in the maybe say, next 5, 10 years?
My personal hope, of course, looking ahead that far, I think it's difficult to predict, but my personal hope is that it does become the de facto approach to producing non-alcoholic products. There are many more, I think, techniques, opportunities available to us to continue exploring in that direction rather than relying on industrial processes. And as we've seen with wine producers that we are either talking to or starting to work with, they have, now that they see the two options ahead of them, I haven't actually come across one that preferred the alcoholization or an industrial method to the natural biological one. They said, now that I know it's an option, well, I want to explore further. I want to understand how we can implement this. Is it a, a completely new process and facility we need? And that's where we, at least for Etiquette's process, we say, not at all. We've designed it so that it can seamlessly slot into what your existing operations already look like. So when your tanks are not full with your alcoholic wine, we're not asking you to, decimate your alcoholic wine production. We're not trying to make you choose either or. It is to give you the optionality, if you wish, to have a low barrier to entry. And instead of feeling pressured to produce 1 million liters a year because you bought this giant dealcoholization machine, um, maybe 1 year's harvest is just not as good. Maybe you produce 10,000 bottles. Next year, it's great. You produce 100,000, 1 million. It's scalable. And that, I think, is the beauty of biology and why I believe that that's why it's going to win out.
And I mean, you can be the segue, especially for the medium or maybe in the future, even for the smaller size companies, to producing alcohol-free products without the dealcoholization process that many of them don't like. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
it just, the one thing that just popped up in my head is currently you rely on the same seasonal process, the harvest, like anyone else, right?
We do to a certain extent. What we have found with our process is that you can use earlier harvest. So,
Mm.
to preempt the use of your tanks for alcoholic winemaking, you could actually run a production with our process before because you can pick earlier. It could also be in certain regions of the world where they are keeping their must throughout the year or throughout a part of the year. Then you can wait until it is less hectic. So not right now, essentially, and wait until February to produce. So yes, we are tied to an agricultural seasonal cycle, but not as strongly as I think alcoholic winemaking is. And our aim really is to empower every producer, big or small, to be able to choose to produce alcohol-free wine whenever it's right for them.
Okay, cool. So hopefully we will see more of these products in the future. What would be your, let's say, final advice or tip for someone who's trying to drink more mindfully but hates the taste of dealcoholized products?
I would say be open-minded and go in without preconceived notions of what something should be. This space is evolving so quickly, even since the time that we started until now. There are increasingly better and better products on the market. Now, some people do like dealcoholized flavor. If you like that, go for it. But explore proxies, explore etiquette's process, which is cutting through the middle. And I'm sure more new players are coming on the market every single week. So, yeah, be open minded and be willing to try again and again because this is a fast improving segment.
Perfect. And I mean, you were part of the Freiheit Festival we had in Munich. Where can people currently get your products if they want to try it?
So, of course, in Copenhagen, we have quite a bit more distribution. Poland, we have a number of distributors. Belgium, we work with one called Perjut. In the Netherlands, we have a couple as well. And hopefully soon in Germany, we will have a distributor. But I think reach out to us. We're a small, dynamic, and very friendly team. So drop us a mail and we can always help you out one way or another.
I can definitely confirm that. Tiffany, thank you very much. It was super interesting. And right now, I have a way better feeling for the whole process, for the category, and also for the development in the future.
Amazing. Alex, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Talk to you soon.
Have a good day. Take care.